Being a marketer's no sweat. You just have to manage dozens of channels, launch hundreds of campaigns, score thousands of leads, and okay, fine, it's a lot of sweat. Unless you have HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools to help you do all that and more. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Rated T to M. Hey, want to hear a PC Game Pass ad? I'll take your silence as a yes. Want new games on day one like Call of Duty Black Ops 6 or Stalker 2? I thought so. How about unlocking all the League of Legends champions when you link your Riot Games account? All for one low monthly price? Well, guess what? We got you. Learn more at xbox.com/PC Game Pass or click the banner. Stalker 2 available November 20th, 2024. Game catalog varies by region and over time. And that's the end of the script.
Hey everyone, it's Kavitha Davidson again, and welcome back to Sportly. This week, we're going to step away from our usual historical lens and bring you an exciting interview with acclaimed political sports writer and one of my good friends, Dave Zirin. Dave is the sports editor for The Nation, where he writes a weekly column, Edge of Sports. He has written 11 books, which is wild, including Game Over, How Politics Has Turned the Sports World Upside Down, The John Carlos Story, and Bad Sports, How Owners Are Ruining the Games That We Love. He's appeared on major platforms like ESPN, CNN, Democracy Now!, and MSNBC. We are old friends. And his writing has been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Sports Illustrated, among many others. And Dave has also been an advisor to filmmakers ranging from Ken Burns to Ang Lee, and has appeared in numerous documentaries. Dave, it's so great to have you here. Welcome to Sportly.
Hey, congratulations on the show. When you asked me to come on, I was so excited because it meant that you were going to be doing more media, and goodness gracious knows that we need this right now.
Oh, thank you. How are you doing? You're in D.C. post-election. Lots going on in sports and the world. What's the world look like to you right now?
Well, the main thing that I'm wrestling with is this question of dual realities that exist in this country right now, that because of the way media operates, because we are so siloed from a media perspective, we don't really have a uniculture. And that's something that people have argued about and discussed. Maybe we've never had a uniculture in this country. Maybe that's a pure and total myth. And I tend to lean that way, especially as someone who's the grandchildren of immigrants, this idea that there's one culture. I think of my grandparents. I'm like, yeah, right, one culture. You didn't see what we were eating for dinner when I would go over to my grandparents' house. But there is that idea, though, if they were watching baseball, then yeah, maybe they were immigrants, but they were also kind of part of America because they were watching baseball. Or they're watching the last episode of MASH because everybody's watching the last episode of MASH. And let's come around the TV and watch The Cosby Show with 40 million other people. You know, that uniculture thing. There was some truth to it. Yet this is the first election that I really, really feel like it's not just about two different medias. It's not just about your Fox over here and your MSNBC over there. It's about two different realities. And if you want to, you can live in a reality in this country now where white people are the number one victims of racism, where nobody cares about the WNBA, where Caitlin Clark's the only person worth watching. I mean, you can create this reality that's not backed by reality, but you'll have media people like flattering your intelligence. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is no WNBA without Caitlin Clark. You're absolutely right. Name the thing. Like white people are just, women have too much power in this country. Whatever they want to say. You can create this incredible feed loop of backwards ideas. But that being said, then we have to look at how people like yourself, people like myself, how does this existence of dual realities, one, how does it affect the world of sports? And two, how does it affect sports coverage? And this past weekend, and I wrote about this for The Nation, I saw the dual reality operation happening in full effect.
The Nick Bosa, Colin Kaepernick piece, right?
Oh my God. Like Monday morning, I get a phone call and I pick up. I don't usually even pick up the phone if I don't know the number, but it was Atlanta, and there's a lot going on in Atlanta. So I just picked up. I was like, oh. And I said, hey, it's TMZ Live. And so immediately my head, I'm like, did I do anything scandalous? But no, they said, we want you to come on our show, TMZ Live, to talk about how Donald Trump dominated the sports weekend. And I was like, huh?
Between UFC and the celebrations and...
What was funny, Kavitha, and you'll appreciate this, is like they said this to me and I was like, no, and hung up. But then I got curious and I Googled Donald Trump dominates sports weekend. Sure enough, big story on Fox. Headline, Donald Trump dominates sports weekend.
Spinning back kick to the body, followed by the Trump dance.
By UFC CEO Dana White, 45, soon to be 47, President-elect Donald Trump.
TMZ, I didn't even know this, so I was writing the article, bought by Fox a couple years ago. So they create this feedback loop. And then I looked at the Fox article. It said, in the world of football, college football, UFC, Donald Trump was everywhere this weekend. So I look it up. Nothing happened in college football related to Trump, as the person had to say, the author at the end of the article. This might not have applied this past weekend to college football, but great coaches like blah, blah, blah. It was that kind of thing. And boxing, all they had was the fact that Jake Paul is a Trump supporter. Ooh, he dominated the world of boxing. Why? Because this one reality TV show asshole endorsed him a couple months ago? Who gives a shit?
I promise you, Ariel Helwani was not bringing up Donald Trump on the Netflix broadcast of Tyson Paul.
No, he was not. Great to see him there, though. The other two pieces, though, it's, UFC. Wow, they love Trump. News at 11. They're run ruthlessly by Dana White, who's only Trump's biggest supporter, spoke at the hate rally at Madison Square Garden, blah, blah, blah. And then in the NFL, where you're talking about 3 NFL players did the little stupid, demented Trump dance after sacks. So, wow, 3 right-wing NFL players. The UFC loves Trump. This is not a story.
No, none of this is a story, and I'm so proud of you for hanging up that phone. And I think that something that people need to realize more is that as media, we do have that choice, and not often enough do we make the right choice on that. So you're right. It's really frustrating that the loudest narratives are the ones that are being amplified right now. And that's been the case. That's how we kind of got to this point politically. And it is incumbent on people like you and me in the media, even if we're quote unquote just in sports media, to make the right decisions there. But along those lines, one of the few great things about this election cycle that I appreciated coming out was with Governor Walz doing the rounds and the idea that why have we just ceded sports to the far right? Sports are not just a space for people with that political leaning. And it seems that we have long just been resigned to it. But and I know plenty of people in our own circles who share the same political ideology that we do, who love sports and who can see great things that come from sports, including protests. So the hope is that people like you and me and our colleagues and friends continue to fight in this space, because we can't just cede an entire cultural institution to a singular ideology.
No, I agree, because it's never really been operated. So while the people who run it may have their own ideology, the collective ideology of sports is a constellation of fans, of players, of other political actors, management. There are all of these different forces that combine to make up the politics of sports. And usually the politics of sports, it comes down to which of these forces has the most weight, has the most power, has the most cultural swag. And I think we saw this past election cycle, something that I think we've been seeing, frankly, since January 6, 2001. And that's really the muting of athletes. What you've seen instead is the politics of backlash become so overwhelming that the politics that you have seen over the last 3 years in sports that are in any way progressive tend to have been defensive in nature.
That backlash is so interesting to me because it's not a proportionate reaction. There's no Newton's law in that, right? And Jonathan Lucroy, for example, who's a former MLB pitcher, played for many teams, big Trump supporter, was very vocal on Twitter. And I think it was Jason Whitlock. God, why was that guy still have a microphone? But I think he was responding to a Whitlock post directly to him, And Whitlock was basically saying, I wish more guys like you had the courage to speak your convictions and to talk about your politics instead of this woke sports mob, which was hilarious. And then Lucroy went on to say the reason that we don't is because most of our owners are far lefties and we're all scared to. And it just belies the facts. The Guardian, you don't even need to know this, but the Guardian has a great database that they put together ahead of the election of all the sports owners, not just in the major leagues, but throughout sports and where their political donations go. And overwhelmingly, they went to Donald Trump or they went to Republicans. And I don't understand how we combat just false facts. The idea that Jonathan Lucroy can go out and say the owners that I have played for are overwhelmingly liberal and Democrat supporters is just not true.
It circles back to what we were talking about at the start of the episode, where if you want to create a reality where pro sports owners are underwriting the left wing in this country and players are these put upon individuals, you know, they used to say stuff like that. I'll tell you, the people in the late 19th century, white athletes who wanted to keep Major League Baseball white. You go back and you listen to what people like Cap Anson said about why baseball was segregated only after it was integrated in the 19th century. It started out as an integrated proposition, and then as Reconstruction fails in the United States, it becomes all white. Black people are forcibly, sometimes violently, pushed out of the sport. And you hear people like Cap Anson, who's a first ballot Major League Baseball Hall of Famer, who was a violent racist at the time. You hear things like he has to say. It's always, this is what the players want. We're pushing back, not just against these other players, but against the people who run this sport. If you think about it, that's kind of the psychology around the people who still see the South's defeat in the Civil War as being this kind of defeat where they were betrayed and it was the lost cause and all the rest of it. It's that mentality that as white men hold the truth, that they are put upon in a way that requires unbelievable courage for them to speak that truth. But then you ask the question, well, who's stopping you from speaking that truth? And it's, the white guy in the owner's box is stopping you from speaking that truth. Like it's a logic that doesn't quite work when it's inspected for just half a second. But that's the thing about when you create these media feedback loops, you don't even have someone to challenge it for that 1/2 second. To be like, wait a minute, is that statistically true? That sports ownership is just this big machine of the Democratic Party? It's utterly absurd. And also the other absurdity too, of course, and this is how we started the show as well, is that a ton of right-wing athletes are just feeling themselves right now.
I also want to say a big thank you to President Donald Trump for being here tonight. Can I get a... Hey, what do you guys think about my version of the Donald Trump? Check it out.
Like they could not be happier. They're going to be loud about it. And it's the Harris supporters, even folks like Steph and LeBron, who did speak out for Harris, they kept that very close to the vest. Think about the WNBA and just do like even the slightest comparison to 2000 when people were writing whole books. The WNBA as a political force. The WNBA won the Senate for the Democrats. The WNBA toppled their own franchise owner, Kelly Loeffler, to put in Raphael Warnock, who preaches at Ebenezer Church. I mean, it's almost like a progressive Disney movie. The legacy of King instead of the evil sports owner, Kelly Loeffler, happening in Georgia, the cradle of the Confederacy. And you have to understand the difference. What happened 4 years later? I don't put that on the players at all. I put that on culturally in this country. What I honestly think is that January 6th scared the fucking shit out of everybody who had been outspoken in the previous cycle and also had something to lose. So you think about people in sports. They have a tremendous platform. They have a tremendous history. They have a tremendous legacy in terms of sports and politics. We know all the names of the icons or their statues are up now in this country. There's been a broad reappreciation of political athletes over the last 2 decades. So many have gotten their flowers who never got them. We're all grateful for that. And this modern generation has also produced some incredible people. But we also know now more than ever, frankly, far more than in Ali's time, these athletes have a lot to lose. And as you well know, and this has been the true case, I think income stratification has gotten more and more obscene, and people who are poor have gotten more and more poor. It's like the kid who becomes the pro athlete becomes oftentimes like a lottery ticket for an entire community, which means there is a great deal of pressure on the individual to not mess up what they're being handed, to not kick away 9 figures of income like Colin Kaepernick did in 2016. I mean, it was taken away from him. He didn't kick it away. But those are the sums we're talking about, like sums that can lift entire generations out of poverty, entire neighborhoods with generational wealth.
Especially when we're talking about Black athletes, we're talking about generational wealth to people who have not been afforded or given opportunities to generational wealth that the rest of the country has. So I don't begrudge anybody from protecting that and from protecting their kids from that. But the athletes that are as loud spoken as they have been since the election, and just generally, they have learned no lessons of sportsmanship, it seems. And it almost seems like the point is to have the argument when we're not really giving it to them right now. And it's just been so wild to see. I did want to backtrack a little bit just because, Dave, you and I have known each other for more than a decade at this point. And I think whenever people do the kind of coverage that you and I do, which is critical of this space, we're often accused of hating sports, which is hilarious because we're masochists in some ways, but I don't think enough to have made this our career if we hated sports. So I just wanted to go through, for our listeners who might not be familiar with you personally, your sporting background. I know how much you love, in particular, Ali era boxing and basketball and all of that. Did you play sports growing up? What was your first kind of connection to sports?
Oh, goodness gracious. I grew up in the 1980s in New York City. So you just think about the personalities I grew up adoring at that time. Because remember, this is before NBA League Pass, WNBA League Pass. You didn't have a sense. Everything is regional in the 1980s and 90s. Everything is regional, except for the game of the week. And then it would be incredibly cool to see like a team from somewhere else. That's something I think is difficult to imagine these days where the access is 24/7. Then it was local and it was in the evenings, unless it was the weekends.
And a ground ball will be a force play at home, and it's goal.
And the people that I got to root for just had me hook, line, and sinker into this world of sports. Like people like Darryl Strawberry.
High drive into deep right field. Evans back at the wall. Gone.
Keith Hernandez and Dwight Gooden.
And Gooden strikes out the side.
On the New York Mets, that was my team. To the Knicks of that time, Patrick Ewing Knicks, John Starks, those teams that everybody still lionizes, even though they didn't win a championship, but it's New York, so everything gets 50 times as much shine and publicity as it would if they were in any other city. Yeah, it's annoying to other people, and yes, I agree with that. But it was incredible. And you're in New York City, of course, me growing up, you got Madison Square Garden right on 33rd Street. You got the train up to Yankee Stadium, Shea Stadium. I mean, back then, Madison Square Garden didn't cost a small house loan to get a ticket to something. So the city was very much all about sports. And I played basketball like a maniac. I played all the time. And I played baseball as well in junior high and high school. So these were my sports. I loved sports. And I was never really into the politics of sports. It never even, until I was in college. And then Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf made the decision to not come out for the national anthem when playing for the Denver Nuggets. I believe it was 1996.
The NBA star refuses to stand for the playing of the national anthem before any basketball game. He calls the American flag a symbol of oppression, of tyranny.
It's clear in the Quran where Islam is the only way. My thing is, I don't criticize those for standing, so don't criticize me.
What was interesting, again, it's like when I speak about this sometimes to like college journalism classes and whatnot, I have to really walk them through the reality of what it was like in 1996. Because we were all, like the people I knew, were all really into this unfolding drama with Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Wait, he's not coming out for the anthem? what's going on here? Why is he doing that? What's it going to do to the team? But we can't get on our phones and look it up. We can't go in a chat room and talk it up. So our only outlet was meeting in like the dorm common room at 7 p.m. so we could crowd around the TV, watch SportsCenter, and then we would all yell at each other about the latest news. And it's so quaint to talk about because it's such a different kind of reality. We could actually have an interesting discussion. Is it better or is it worse to have that kind of media access? There are certainly pros and cons. But on the it was better back then front, which of course is what I guess I'm obligated to say at my age, one, it forced us to confront this news collectively. So we're all together, looking at it together, talking about it together. It's not consumed in isolation. Like we talked about earlier, the Matt Gaetz news about Trump's AG wannabe stepping down. We all heard about that immediately. Whoa, it's on our phones. Imagine if none of us could even hear about it until 7 p.m., and then when we heard about it, we were with 20 or 30 other people. And how much do we really gain out of life, frankly, that we're hearing about it now instead of 5.5 hours from now? What do those 5.5 hours give us? That's so critical to have this information. So it's this idea of when there's crisis, it gets downloaded into your brain the second that it happens, and then you consume it, and then maybe you go on to the next thing. Oh, maybe you got to meet somebody for dinner. Maybe you got work, a million other things. But with this Raouf story, we were all there together, 7 p.m., watching it, consuming it, arguing about it. We didn't all agree about it. That was one of the things that made it really different. And also not having the latest news of it downloaded into our brains the second it happened, that in retrospect was quite a relief as well. Now, since I don't want to sound like I'm Archie Bunker or something talking about the good old days, let's talk about the really shitty part of that. And this has to be said over and over again, is that the really shitty part of the Raouf story in 1996 is that big media controlled the story.
How do you feel about Mohammed Abdul-Rauf refusing to stand during the national anthem?
Well, I feel that was kind of a slap in the face because people, that's an honor to be able to stand and, do as everybody else is doing and honor what we should honor, our country.
So you only had one narrative, and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf couldn't even get his narrative out there to say why he was doing what he was doing. And so we were all kind of left, I remember this at the time, responding to how ESPN reported it. And it's funny looking back on that. I wish I could be like middle-aged and looking at everybody and commenting on it. Because like none of us, in retrospect, were commenting on anything that Raouf was actually saying about why he was doing what he was doing. It was all reaction to how ESPN was reporting it. And that monopoly on how information was heard, I think swallowed up and destroyed many political athletes, male, female, non-binary, over the course of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, when there was more of a politicization. It just swallowed them up and cut their heads off. So I'm grateful for social media so we can support some of these athletes today. But I also think we really lose something the way we consume of their heroism or sheroism as individuals and not collectively.
In many ways, 20 years later, Colin Kaepernick's story was co-opted by people who wanted to push the narrative of what he was and wasn't protesting, but he was still able to speak for himself. And that was not the case with Raouf in 96. And for listeners who don't know, Raouf was suspended by the NBA for protesting during the anthem and never got another contract. So not a lot actually changed in those 20 years, despite media being wildly different and league leadership being wildly different than it was in the mid-90s, too.
Can I get one tiny change, though, that's nice? Is that I finally got in 2016, after years of trying, I finally got an interview with Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. And I'd been speaking with him for about a decade at that point. He knew already how much he meant to my own political development. He knew already how much his heroism meant to me and other people. He was very kind to me. But he always said, I'm too burned by the experience. I never want to talk about it. But then in 2016, when Cap was getting flowers on social media, that's what gave Raouf the confidence to say, yeah, I want to talk now. It's just, there's something beautiful about that, about Colin's struggle for all its ups and downs that we can talk about. The fact that, if nothing else, it gave people like Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf the confidence to say, hey, I'm ready to have my story be heard.
And it is something that we've seen, whether it's about Kaepernick and police brutality protests, George Floyd protests. Me Too protests. We have throughout at least the last 10 years, things were either swept under the rug or not discussed the way that they are now 20, 30 years ago. We have seen many athletes say, I remember watching this person come out, or I remember watching this person talk about this, and that gave me the courage. And that's when you get that snowball effect. And one of the positive things I will say that has come out of the current media environment is being able to find the community that thinks like you, that supports you, that believes in your humanity and your human rights and your right to exist in the sports space and in the world. And that is the stratification of media has allowed that to happen, at least. Now, on the other hand, it has also allowed the loudest minority voices, the people who might not represent what the rest of the country actually thinks, but can say it the loudest or in the most clickbaity way, to rise to the top, and especially the top of algorithms run by certain soon-to-be maybe government officials.
No, he's just a volunteer, remember?
He's just a volunteer. He's just a volunteer for a government efficiency office. That's exactly what that means. There's no oversight.
As we've been talking, it's very interesting. Sometime we might have to do like a whole comparing and contrasting when we started sports writing to now, what's changed, what's the same. Because I really do think we live in this ticker tape time, and there's no time to just take a breath and say, how have things changed? How are they the same, particularly in recent years? And I think so much is different in the last 15 years. It defies description. And just one of the things I was thinking about when you were talking is when Jason Collins said, I'm going to be the first out NBA player. I remember writing about it a lot, and I remember reading and quoting Martina Navratilova. And she wrote a piece about it for Sports Illustrated. And one of the things she wrote, which I remember like sending this quote out to everybody and being like, this is the quote to remember. Martina said that Jason Collins is going to be the first drop of a tidal wave. There's so many people who are closeted in the world of sports. They're all going to start coming out now because Jason Collins is showing that. And she was specifically speaking about men, but she was talking about women too. But she really was focusing on men because that of course, is where the closet has been most pernicious and most persistent on that side of the sporting aisle. And I say that while being very clear that it's not a Shangri-La for people who aren't men to be open about their sexuality. I'm not saying that at all. But men is where the trailblazing was happening with Jason Collins. So she said it's going to be now a dam is going to burst, is how she put it. So not only has the dam not burst at all post Jason Collins, and we need to assess why. We need to say either, gee, I guess there aren't any gay male players in sports, or we need to say, why has the closet been so persistent, even in 2024? And we also have to say, what the hell happened to Martina?
Yeah, what the hell happened to Martina is really the most disappointing part of that. The lesbian turfs are the ones that I probably is not fair to be most mad at, but I am probably the most mad at, but especially someone as trailblazing and as socially important as Martina, because what she says just matters more than almost anybody else. But on the dam not bursting, it's really interesting. We had Michael Sam, right? We had Carl Nassib, who came out more like probably the most recent in my memory for at least a major men's North American league. And that's kind of it. And as you said, we've obviously had countless women in soccer and in the WNBA who have long been out. But even the WNBA had to come to a reckoning on that. You know, I'm old enough to remember a time when the W was really trying to kind of ignore the fact that most of its players were gay Black women. And now it's something that's totally celebrated. And one of the beautiful things that's actually come out of the media coverage and the social media from the W is when people like switch over to watch the NBA, they're like, what do you mean your players aren't married? What do you mean we don't get proposals on the floor? But on the dam not bursting thing, I think one of the interesting things is obviously there are forces at play that are keeping people in the closet, because it's ridiculous to think that there aren't more gay men in sports. And I will say shout out to, we recently lost Billy Beane, an MLB, who was a fantastic advocate for this and was gay and out himself and did a lot of really good behind the scenes work that I don't think gets enough credit because he had to do it under the umbrella of the league. But it was the face-to-face conversations that he had with players that he and I would talk about that I thought were probably the most impactful thing. But I think with every successive generation, we get way more tolerant, if not don't even think about our brothers and sisters who are gay. And I have found that in talking to young athletes, they genuinely do not care if their teammates are gay. So I don't know if right now the closet is stonewalled, excuse the pun, up there because of pressure from fellow teammates. I absolutely think 10 years ago when you and I, were writing about this with Jason Collins coming out, there was much more of a fear that there would be bullying and that there would be destruction, quote unquote. I think it was the word that was thrown around when Michael Sam came out. But now I think it comes more from anti-LGBTQ fans are louder and have more of a platform, and a lot more hate mail and hate messages on social media that people have talked about. And that ownership still, I think, remains on the side of we don't want to talk about this. And then the right has also managed to use the really non-existent problem of trans athletes as a major cudgel to be able to kind of, and the idea that they're doing this in defense of women's sports is ridiculous to me. But I do think on the positive side, even though we haven't seen that dam burst, I have a lot of faith in younger generations of players not caring about and being supportive of their gay teammates. And I think we're also seeing that with people like Dwayne Wade, who has a queer child and has talked very lovingly about them. And I think that as we hopefully, as we fight for the rights that are probably going to be taken away, that we do at least culturally continue down a path of acceptance.
We have to. And what people like Martina and so many people have said to her, I mean, people have said to her like 50 different variations of this argument, because all the variations of the argument are very important for why her being this very prominent anti-trans voice is so deeply harmful, given who she is on every level. And when I say who she is, her identity contains multitudes that affect so many different communities. If you think about it, like immigrant, East European, gay, of course, pro athlete. I mean, these are the two things about the argument that really, really, really upset me. The first is when she went so hardcore coming out against someone who is not trans, Amini Khalef, the boxer from Algeria at the Summer Olympics, who Trump repeatedly called trans on the campaign trail.
There will be no men playing in women's sports when we're elected. They want to have men playing in women's sports. You saw the boxer today, the Italian female boxer, just saying, I can't be two shots. She pulled away. She said, I can't fight.
To Martina, it's like the reason why they're attacking her is the same reason you were attacked in the 1980s. Non-bodily conformity. You don't look like you're supposed to look. And people used to call Martina a man all the time and misgender her. The other part, though, about Martina that just like it makes your head spin, and I'm riffing on something you said, but the closet gets really rough for all queer people when trans people are attacked, because it's a way of sending the message of you could be next, if or unless. And the unless is left unspoken, but the unless invariably means from the right-wing context, you shut up. You don't say who you are. There was this moment where one of Trump's supporters, who's gay, Richard Grenell, who was, I believe, the ambassador to Germany last time around, he said, we may not get the majority of the gay vote, but we'll get the majority of the normal gays, quote unquote. That's what Martina doesn't realize, is that her push to normalization is actually really, really oppressive to, frankly, the people who she's the ancestor of,
And it's the idea of pulling the ladder up behind you in all of the ways. Dave, I wanted to hit one thing, and then I promise I'll let you go. We're going to be doing a couple of episodes coming up on Sportly about sports diplomacy and also sports washing. And I saw this fantastic interview that you gave with Amanpour and Company, which, one of our few but fantastic bastions of journalism is that show, and also Christiane. And I know the various ways that sports washing take place. And one of the things that I want to caveat this conversation with is saying that the U.S. also engages in this. And I think that too often we talk about countries like Russia and Qatar and the UAE, and we don't talk about it happening at home. So I do want to point that out. But most recently, the NBA has come under fire for its partnership with the UAE, for holding games over there, for having Emirates as a sponsor. And Human Rights Watch and other people have warned against the Emiratis' use of sports, not just through the NBA, but through golf and other sports, certainly soccer, to distract or take attention away from real human rights abuses that are happening in their country. And the fascinating thing to me when I started just researching what the latest chatter has been about this is that most of this pushback is coming, that I saw at least, was coming from right-wing media. The first hit that I saw on this was from Fox News. And I can't remember the last time I saw Fox News cite Human Rights Watch, but this put me in a very interesting place where I absolutely do agree that sports washing is a problem. The Emiratis are guilty of it. I have problems with leagues like the NBA agreeing to do business because it can be a chicken or the egg thing. Just does a sports league do it and then the rest of the business community does it? Or is it normalized by the business community so a sports league can do it there too? But then the idea that a league like the NBA has always been in the crosshairs of right-wing media, shut up and dribble and all of that. But how do you kind of reconcile the idea that both of these things can be true and both of these entities can also be a little bit wrong?
Oh, well, that's a great question. First and foremost, I'd be pointing out the profound hypocrisy of Fox complaining about the NBA taking Saudi money, given how much MBS has his Mohammed bin Salman and the Saudi Arabian royal family, the House of Saud, has their money in so many right-wing bouilla bases and soups around this country, authoritarian governments. I mean, they are very openly trying to use, and this is not like a conspiracy theory. They want to host the Olympics. They want to host the World Cup. They want to do both in the 2030s. They are becoming one of the few areas of the world left that has the money to put on these mega events, make sure everybody gets paid, and have enough security forces to quell the fears of, well, it's less the fears of countries and more the needs of the security agencies of the world and the defense industry, which treats the Olympics like it's their Super Bowl, like their big party, because they get to unveil all their new toys for surveillance. But they're viewing, like the sports world is viewing Saudi Arabia as utterly essential financial source for their survival over the next period. And I shouldn't really say survival. I should say their enrichment over the next period, because it's where they see the profits coming from. And if they don't have Saudi Arabia integrated into it, they're not going to hit it. Yes, the sports washing is very real. Yes, Jamal Khashoggi was chopped up by a bone saw. Yes, they killed dissidents, the women, LGBTQ people. And one would think that, on the very basic level, to show solidarity with the oppressed means opposing sports washing within the Saudi context. That being said, I think the way we have to talk about it is the way you started it, which is that sports washing is something that exists in every society where there is inequality. If you don't think sports washing is going on right now in Los Angeles as they gear up for the 2028 Olympics, because what is sports washing at the end of the day is using sports as a distraction so you can both project an image to the world of great power and success and project an image internally in your country or in your city as the sports being a way forward financially, culturally, from a tourist perspective, however you want to put it, that the Olympics or the World Cup or hosting the Super Bowl is going to lead us forward. And it would be a distraction from the people who are actually suffering under the weight of hosting these events. And I mean, there's no way out of it, I think, other than opposing every time we see sports being used for something that people would disagree with if sports weren't attached to it. And will the right wing jump on this to attack the NBA? Absolutely. That's going to happen. Will left wing people speak out about how marginalized people are treated in Saudi Arabia and China? Yes, they are. And they should. I think we just always have to have clarity and open solidarity with the dissidents and the oppressed in these countries, because that's the only way to cut against the nationalism that the right always brings to these stories.
Absolutely. And just very quickly on the LA front, I lived there for a year and I saw firsthand the problem they have with unhoused. They have one of the worst problems with food insecurity. And it's going to be interesting to see when the Olympics are there, how they handle all of the localized problems in LA, let alone the issues that we just have as a country with inequality, because I'm old enough to remember, I was in San Francisco for Super Bowl 50, and they were the liberal city of San Francisco that I believe Gavin Newsom was mayor of at the time, was busing unhoused people out of there and demolishing tent cities to build Super Bowl City. And that is a great example of the way that we have sports washing here in our own country.
Say you mentioned Super Bowl 50. This is how sports washing works, because Super Bowl 50, it's in the Bay Area. It's the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Black Panther Party. It's Beyonce was when she did the halftime show with the Black Berets formation. And hey, if you want to throw a little more fun onto it, one of the quarterbacks was Cam Newton, and one of the founders of the Panthers was Huey Newton. Hey, you could do a whole Black Panther 50-year back and forth if you wanted to. And yet in the process of all of this, you have just incredible injustice thrown on the shoulders of particularly Black families in that area of the country. Generally, the Bay Area has been really, really difficult for marginalized communities. And when you throw on the expense and securitization of the Super Bowl that went with that, I mean, it almost feels like some horrible parody, as you invariably get. You get in England before the 2012 Olympics, they did this salute to the national healthcare system, was part of the Olympic opening ceremony, and people are getting kicked out of their homes for the stadiums. I mean, that's what sports washing is really about.
For sure. And for anybody who wants to go deeper into Dave's expertise on sports washing, I recommend his fantastic book, Brazil's Dance with the Devil, which deals with the Rio Olympics and the World Cup and all of the issues that went around there. Dave, it's always so great to talk to you. I always feel energized after our conversations. I hope it's not as long as it's been since the next time we talk. And thank you for being with us today.
I just want to say how great it is that you're doing this pod, how great it is that your voice is going to get out there in a way that's more than just 5 to 7 minutes on a cable network, because you have so much to say. The knowledge level is so deep. I look forward to not only listening as you go forward, but spreading the word to the folks I know.
Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sportly. We hope you enjoyed this conversation with Dave Zirin. Please check his work out at The Nation. And thank you so much for listening to the pod. Sportly is an Immigrantly Media production. This episode was produced by Sadia Khan and Shay Yu. Our sound designer and editor is Lena Cheng. Our theme music was created by Simon Hutchinson. Other music by Epidemic Sound. Tune back in next week and every week after for more Sportly.